The tracks appeared first. Nathaniel Kane stood at the edge of his trapline rifle cradled in the crook of his arm, staring down at the impossible. Fresh footprints in snow that had fallen only hours before. Human footprints, alone. Heading east toward the cliff face where the mountain dropped away into nothing but white and wind, and a 300-foot fall onto rocks that would not forgive. He had not seen another human being in 2 months. The snow fell harder now, thick flakes that caught in his beard and turned the world into a painting done in grays and whites. Nate followed the tracks. He did not hurry. In country like this, in weather like this, hurrying got you killed. But something pulled at him, something he could not name. The tracks were small. A woman maybe, or a young man. The stride was irregular, stumbling. Whoever had made these prints was already dying. The wind spoke in tongues he had learned to understand during 7 winters alone on this mountain. It told him a storm was coming, a real one, the kind that buried cabins and killed livestock and made men disappear until the spring thaw revealed what was left. He should turn back. He should let the mountain take what it wanted. The mountain always took what it wanted in the end. But he kept walking. The tracks led him along the granite spine of the ridge, past the twisted pine that marked the boundary of his territory, past the frozen waterfall where he sometimes sat and tried to remember what it felt like to be someone other than the man he had become. The prince wandered zigzag, the sign of someone beyond exhaustion, beyond sense, running on nothing but the animal reflex to keep moving because stopping meant dying. He found her at the edge. She had not fallen. She had simply stopped, as if the effort of taking one more step had finally proven too much. She lay curled on her side in the snow, one arm stretched out toward the drop, the other clutched against her chest. She wore a traveling coat, good wool, but not good enough for this weather, and a hat that had come loose and lay a few feet away, already half buried. Nate approached slowly. He had found dead things before. The mountain gave them to him sometimes like offerings. Deer that had starved through a hard winter. A wolf caught in one of his traps, frozen in its own blood. Once a prospector who had come up looking for gold and found only the same white death that found everyone who stayed too long. But when he knelt beside her, he saw the rise and fall of her back. Shallow, too slow, but alive. He reached out, touched her shoulder. Her coat was stiff with ice. That was when he saw the letter. She held it in the hand pressed against her chest, fingers locked around it with the last of her strength. The paper was old yellow, with age stained with something dark that might have been blood. The snow had not touched it. She had protected it even as she let herself freeze. Nate pulled off his glove, worked her fingers loose with careful pressure. She did not resist. She was too far gone for that. The letter came free, and he turned it over. The world stopped. The handwriting was neat, precise, the kind of script they taught in military academies, but it was the signature at the bottom made Nate's legs give out. He sat back in the snow, staring at the name. Thomas Hartford, the name he had spent 5 years trying to forget, the name that found him anyway every night in his dreams, every morning when he woke and remembered what he had done. The name carved into his soul with the same bullet that had carved into Thomas Hartford's chest while he knelt in the Montana dirt and said, "I am innocent," and Nate had not believed him. Nate looked at the dying woman, then at the letter, then back at the woman. No, this was impossible. This was the universe playing a cruel joke. He stood abruptly, backed away 3 steps, 4. The woman made a sound. A small broken thing that was not quite a word. Her hand reached blindly, searching for the letter he had taken. Nate stared at her, at this stranger who carried Thomas Hartford's name in her freezing fingers. If she was connected to Thomas, if she came looking for answers, saving her would destroy everything. The peace he had built, the isolation that kept him safe, the 7 years of running from what he had done. Better to leave her. Let the mountain take her. Let the secret stay buried. Thomas Hartford was dead. Whatever brought this woman to his mountain could die with her. Nate turned, started to walk away. He made it 10 steps. Then he stopped. The woman's breathing had changed. Slower, more labored. She was minutes from death now, not hours. And Nate stood there 10 steps away, listening to her die. Thomas Hartford's voice echoed in his memory, words from 7 years ago, from before everything went wrong. A good man doesn't count the cost, Nate. He just does what's right. Nate closed his eyes. The snow fell harder. 30 seconds passed, maybe a minute, the longest minute of his life. Then he cursed. It came out as a cloud of white breath that the wind took. He turned back, stripped off his coat, knelt beside the woman, and wrapped the coat around her. "I am going to regret this," he muttered to the unconscious woman, to himself, to the ghost of Thomas Hartford. "I am going to regret this for the rest of my life." But he lifted her anyway, lifted her as carefully as he could manage with hands gone clumsy from cold. She weighed nothing. The mountain had already taken most of her. He was just carrying what was left. He had made his choice, and there was no taking it back now. The walk back took an eternity. The storm came in hard and fast, the way storms did at this elevation, turning the air into a wall of white that erased the world. Nate navigated by feel, by the memory burned into his muscles from 7 winters of walking these same paths. The woman did not move in his arms. Once he stopped to check if she was still breathing. She was, barely. His cabin appeared like a miracle out of the snow. Small, solid, the only human thing for 20 miles in any direction. Smoke should have been rising from the chimney, but the fire had died hours ago. Nate kicked the door open, carried the woman inside, laid her on his bed. She looked dead. She looked like all the dead he had carried, all the bodies from the war that never left him, no matter how far he ran. But she was not dead yet. Nate moved fast now. He built up the fire until it roared, filled his kettle with snow to melt, stripped the wet clothes from the woman's body with hands that remembered field medicine, that remembered triage, that remembered which men could be saved and which could not. She was hypothermic, deep into it, her core temperature so low that warming her too fast would kill her as surely as the cold. He wrapped her in blankets, dry wool, and fur, everything he had. He warmed water, got some of it into her mouth, a few drops at a time. She swallowed by reflex. That was good. That meant some part of her still wanted to live. He sat beside the bed and waited. Outside the storm screamed. Inside the fire crackled and the woman breathed, and Nate pulled the letter from his coat and read it by firelight. The writing was faded, the words hard to make out. But he knew this letter. He had been there when Thomas Hartford wrote it the night before the execution, when they still let condemned men have paper and pen, and the pretense that their last words might matter to someone. The letter was addressed to Clara. Nate folded it again, put it away. His grip faltered as he tried to set it down. Hours passed. The storm did not let up. Nate fed the fire, checked the woman-boiled coffee he did not drink. He could not stop moving. If he stopped, he would have to think, and thinking would take him back to places he had spent 5 years trying to leave behind. When the woman finally stirred, it was deep into the night. She gasped, and her eyes opened. They were brown, the same brown as Thomas Hartford's eyes. Nate stood frozen by the fire. She looked around the cabin, taking in the rough log walls, the single room, the man standing over her, with firelight turning him into something half-shadow. Her hand moved under the blankets, searching. "The letter!" Her voice was broken, barely there. "Where is the letter?" Nate did not move. "You're safe. You need to rest." "The letter!" Louder now, edged with panic. "I had a letter. Where is it?" He pulled it from his coat, held it out. She snatched it from him, clutched it to her chest, the same way she had in the snow, and closed her eyes. Her whole body relaxed. "Thank you," a whisper. "Thank you." Nate stepped back. "What's your name?" She opened her eyes again, studied him. She was evaluating, he realized, trying to decide if she could trust him. "Clara." A pause. "Clara Hartford." The world tilted. Nate kept his face still. 7 years of poker and army camps had taught him how to lie with every part of himself except his hands, and he shoved those into his pockets. "You came up here alone." He kept his voice neutral. "In this weather, I was looking for someone." Her eyes did not leave his face. "A man named Nathaniel Kane. Do you know him?" Every muscle in Nate's body locked. The fire popped. Outside, the wind howled. He had a choice. He could tell the truth. He could say yes. "I am Nathaniel Kane. I am the man your brother wrote about. I am the man who killed him." He could give her what she came for, or he could lie. "No," the word came out steady. "My name is Samuel Grant. I've been up here 6 years. I don't know anyone named Kane." Clara's face fell. She looked away, blinking hard. "I see." Her voice was small. "I thought maybe. The letter said he lived in the Montana mountains. I thought maybe." Guilt sat in Nate's chest like a stone. But he had made his choice. "You should sleep." He moved toward the door. "The storm will blow out by morning. I'll take you down to Timber Falls then. You can ask around there." "Wait." Clara struggled to sit up. "Please, I don't even know where I am. How did you find me?" "You were walking toward a cliff." Nate did not look at her. "Another few minutes, and you'd have gone over." "Why did you help me?" The question stopped him. He turned, looked at this woman who had her brother's eyes and her brother's letter, and no idea that the man she was looking for was standing right in front of her. "Because you needed help." It was not an answer, but it was all he had. Clara studied him in the firelight. "Thank you, Mr. Grant. I owe you my life." Nate left before she could see his face. He went outside into the storm, stood in the snow, until the cold bit through his shirt and made his lungs burn. The wind tried to push him over. He let it. Inside through the window, he could see Clara holding the letter, reading it, her lips moving over words Nate knew by heart, because he had read them 100 times in his own nightmares. He had lied to her. He would keep lying. And maybe, if God had any mercy left, she would never know the truth. The storm blew all night. Nate did not sleep. He sat by the fire while Clara rested in his bed, and he thought about Thomas Hartford kneeling in the dirt, and he thought about the letter, and he thought about the terrible mathematics of the universe that would bring Thomas Hartford's sister to his door in the middle of a Montana winter. When morning came, the world was buried under 3 feet of new snow. Clara woke to find Nate cooking something over the fire, some kind of porridge made from oats and dried berries. He did not look at her when he handed her a bowl. "Storm's bad." His voice was flat. "Might be a few days before we can get you down the mountain." Clara ate in silence. She was watching him. He could feel it, studying him. He kept his back turned, busied himself with tasks that did not need doing. "Mr. Grant." Her voice was stronger today. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask." "Have you been alone up here all this time?" "Mostly." "That must be hard." Nate poured coffee. It's quiet." "I meant lonely." He turned, finally looked at her. She was sitting up in bed now, blankets wrapped around her shoulders, hair loose around her face. She looked less like a corpse today, more like a person. "Why are you looking for Nathaniel Kane?" The question came out harder than he meant it to. Clara's hand went to the letter on the table beside the bed. "He knew my brother, Thomas. Thomas died 5 years ago, and his last letter to me said if anything happened to him, I should find Nathaniel Kane, that he would know the truth. Truth about what? About why Thomas died." Her voice went quiet. "They said he was a deserter, that he ran from battle and they executed him for it. But Thomas wouldn't do that. He wouldn't. And his letter said Nathaniel Kane would know." Nate turned away. His fingers trembled as he set down his cup. Maybe some truths are better left buried. Not this one. There was steel in her voice now. "I've spent 5 years wondering if my brother died a coward. I need to know. I need to understand." Nate stared into the fire. "And if you find this Kane and he tells you something you don't want to hear, what then? Then at least I'll know." 3 days passed. The snow kept falling. Clara grew stronger, strong enough to move around the cabin, strong enough to help with small tasks. She was quiet, but not uncomfortably so. She read from the books on Nate's shelf, old volumes of philosophy and poetry he had brought up the mountain, thinking they would keep him company. She cooked when he let her, making meals from his meager supplies that tasted better than anything he had eaten in years, and every night she read the letter. Nate watched her from across the cabin. He saw the way her fingers traced the words, the way her lips moved over her brother's name. He saw the grief still fresh on her face, 5 years old, but raw as an open wound. On the third night, Nate woke to the sound of crying. Clara sat by the dying fire, the letter in her lap, her shoulders shaking with sobs she tried to keep quiet. Nate lay still, pretending to sleep on his makeshift bed on the floor. He should leave her to her grief. It was not his business. But then she spoke to the letter, to her dead brother, her voice broken. "I miss you, Thomas. I miss you every day. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I couldn't save you." Nate closed his eyes. He knew that guilt. He carried the same weight, the same terrible knowledge that he had failed someone who needed him. Before he could think better of it, he stood, moved to the fire. Clara looked up, startled, wiping at her eyes. "I'm sorry," she tried to smile. "I didn't mean to wake you." Nate did not answer. He poured water into the kettle, set it over the coals. They sat in silence while it heated. When it was ready, he poured 2 cups of tea, handed her one. Clara took it, cradled it in both hands. "Do you ever lose anyone, Mr. Grant?" The question sat between them. "Yes." "Does it get easier?" "No." He stared into his cup. "You just get better at carrying it." Clara nodded slowly. They drank their tea. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind had finally died down. "Tell me about him." Nate did not know why he said it. "Your brother." Clara's face changed. The grief was still there, but something else too. Love, pride. "He was good." Simple words. "He was the best person I ever knew. He took care of me after our parents died, made sure I had an education, a future. He joined the army because he believed in serving something bigger than himself." She paused. "He wrote to me every week, long letters about what he saw, what he learned. He said the men in his unit were like brothers to him." Nate's chest constricted, and then the letters stopped. Clara's voice went flat. "For 3 months, nothing. And then an officer came to the house in Boston and told me Thomas had been executed for desertion. They said he ran from battle. They said he was a coward. They said a lot of things, but none of them were true." "How do you know?" "Because I knew Thomas." She looked at Nate. "And because of this." She held up the letter. In the firelight, Nate could see words he had watched Thomas write. He sent this 2 days before he died. It wasn't a long letter, just a few lines. But he said if anything happened to him, I should find Nathaniel Kane. That Kane would know the truth. That Kane was a good man even if he didn't believe it himself. Nate stood abruptly. "You should get some sleep. Long day tomorrow." Clara looked up at him, confused by the sudden dismissal. But she nodded, went back to bed. Nate stood by the fire until dawn, Thomas Hartford's words echoing in his head. A good man. He had not been a good man. He had been a soldier. He had followed orders. And when they told him Thomas Hartford was a deserter who had betrayed his brothers and needed to be executed, Nate had done his duty. He had done his duty, and Thomas Hartford had died, and nothing had been good about any of it. The storm broke on the 4th day. Nate went outside to check the damage, found 3 feet of snow, but clear skies. He could get Clara down to Timber Falls today if they left soon. He should tell her. He should stop this now before it went any further. But when he came back inside, Clara was up-dressed, looking stronger than she had since he found her. She smiled when she saw him. "Is it over, the storm?" "It's over." "Can we go to town today? I need to ask about Mr. Kane." Nate nodded, started packing supplies. "Mr. Grant?" Clara's voice stopped him. "Why do you live up here all alone?" He looked at her. "Same reason you came looking for ghosts. Sometimes the past doesn't let you go." Clara studied his face. "You have nightmares. I hear you at night." Nate froze. "You say you're sorry." Her voice was gentle. Over and over, you say I'm sorry. Old war. The words came out rough. Long time ago. Thomas was in the war too. Clara moved closer. Before he joined the army, he had nightmares. I used to sit with him until they passed. Something in Nate's chest cracked. I'm not your brother. I know. Clara reached out, touched his arm. But maybe you understand what it's like to carry something you can't put down. Nate looked at her hand on his arm. He should pull away. He should maintain distance. But he had not been touched by another human being in 7 years, and the simple warmth of it made him feel like he might break. We should go. He moved away. Before another storm comes in. They set out an hour later. The walk down the mountain was slow, treacherous, with new snow hiding the path. Nate went first, breaking trail. Clara followed, steady but struggling. She was still weak. Halfway down she stumbled. Nate caught her before she fell. I'm fine. She pulled away quickly. Just tired. But she was not fine. Nate could see the exhaustion in her face the way she leaned on her walking stick. There's a place we can rest. He pointed to a cluster of pines. Not much further. They made it to the trees. Nate built a small fire, boiled coffee. Clara sat on a fallen log, breathing hard. Can I ask you something, Mr. Grant? She did not look at him. When you found me, was there anything else with me? Any papers, any belongings? Nate's pulse jumped. Just the letter. Why, I had a photograph. Her voice was distant. Of Thomas, in his uniform. I must have dropped it in the snow. It's gone by now. Buried. Clara nodded. I suppose it doesn't matter. I have his face memorized anyway. They sat in silence. The coffee boiled. Nate poured 2 cups. What will you do? He handed her one. If you find Kane, and he can't tell you what you want to hear. Clara wrapped her hands around the cup. I don't know. I've spent 5 years with one question. I'm not sure who I am without it. Nate understood that. He had spent 5 years with one truth. He was not sure who he would be if he ever let it go. They finished their coffee, continued down the mountain. Timber Falls appeared through the trees as the sun started to set. A small town, barely more than a trading post, and a few scattered buildings. The church steeple rose white against the darkening sky. Clara stopped at the edge of town. Thank you, Mr. Grant, for everything. There's a boarding house. Nate pointed. Run by Mrs. Miller. She's decent. Tell her Samuel Grant sent you. Clara looked at him. Will I see you again? Nate should say no. He should walk away now, back to his mountain, back to his solitude. He should let her ask her questions and get her answers from someone else. But he heard himself say, I come down once a month for supplies. Maybe. Clara smiled. It changed her whole face, made her look young, made her look like someone who had not spent 5 years chasing ghosts. I'd like that. She walked toward the boarding house. Nate watched until she disappeared inside. Then he turned and started back up the mountain. He made it halfway before he had to stop. His whole body was shaking. He sat down in the snow and put his head in his hands. Clara Hartford, Thomas Hartford's sister. The woman he had saved, the woman he had lied to, the woman who was looking for him and had no idea she had already found him. Nate pulled the letter from his coat. Read it again in the fading light. Thomas had written about him, had called him a good man, had told his sister to trust him, and Nate had killed him. He sat in the snow until dark, until the cold started to bite. Then he stood and walked back to his cabin. The place felt emptier than it had in 7 years. He built a fire, made coffee, sat in the chair by the window. On the table he found something Clara had left behind. Handkerchief, white linen, with her initials embroidered in blue thread. C.H. Clara Hartford. Nate picked it up, held it to his face. It smelled like lavender and grief, and the life he had taken from her when he pulled that trigger 5 years ago. He sat by the fire all night, the handkerchief in his hands, and he knew with terrible certainty that he could not keep lying. The truth would come out. It always did. And when it did, Clara Hartford would look at him with those brown eyes that were her brother's eyes, and she would know. She would know he was the man who had destroyed her life, and there would be no forgiveness for that. Morning came gray and cold. Nate stood at his window looking down the mountain toward Timber Falls. He could not see the town from here, but he knew it was there. Knew Clara was there, asking questions, looking for a man who was standing in this cabin watching the sunrise, trying to decide what kind of coward he wanted to be, the kind who kept lying or the kind who told the truth and faced what came after. He was still standing there when he heard the sound, footsteps, light running, coming up the path toward his cabin. Nate grabbed his rifle, moved to the door. He did not get visitors. Ever. That was the whole point of living on top of a mountain. The door burst open before he could reach it. A child stood in the doorway. A girl, maybe 12 years old, with tangled blonde hair and a face red from running. She wore a dress that was too thin for the weather and boots that were too big. She was breathing hard, clutching a basket to her chest. "Lily." Nate lowered the rifle. "What are you doing here?" The girl grinned. "Brought you eggs. Mrs. Miller had extra, and I told her I'd bring some up." She pushed past him into the cabin, set the basket on the table. "She said you helped that lady who got lost in the storm, the pretty one from Boston. Is she your sweetheart now?" Nate closed the door. "She's not my sweetheart, but she's pretty though, right?" Lily was already poking around the cabin the way she always did. "Mrs. Miller said she's looking for someone, said she's asking all over town about some man named Kane." "You know him." Nate's hand tightened on the rifle. "No." Lily picked up the handkerchief Clara had left behind. "This hers? Give me that." But Lily was already holding it up to the light, examining the embroidery. "C.H. What's her name?" "Clara Hartford." "Hartford." Lily tested the name. "That's fancy. She from a fancy family?" "I don't know. Put that down." Lily set the handkerchief back on the table, turned to face him. Her expression was suddenly serious. "You okay, Nate? You look bad." Nate moved to the stove, started making coffee. "I'm fine." "You're lying." Lily climbed into his chair, drew her knees up to her chest. "You always make that face when you're lying, like you ate something sour." "I don't have a face." "You do. You're making it right now." Nate poured coffee. Did not offer Lily any. She was too young for coffee, and Mrs. Miller would have his head if he gave it to her anyway. Lily had appeared 2 years ago, the daughter of a prospector and his wife, who had come to Timber Falls looking for silver. They found fever instead. The whole camp got sick. Most of them died. Lily's parents had been among them. The town tried to find her family back east. There was none. So Mrs. Miller took her in, and Lily had stayed a wild thing who ran through the mountains and showed up at Nate's cabin whenever she felt like it. He should have sent her away, should have told her to leave him alone. But she reminded him of the little sister he had lost to cholera when he was 14, and he was weak enough that sometimes he let her stay. "So?" Lily swung her legs. "This Clara lady, what's she like?" "I don't know." "You saved her life. You must know something." Nate drank his coffee, said nothing. Lily studied him with eyes too old for her face. "You like her?" "I don't know her, but you like her." Lily grinned. "You do, I can tell. You're all nervous and weird." "Go home, Lily." "Can't. Mrs. Miller sent me to invite you to dinner tonight. She's making pot roast. And she said you have to come because the lady from Boston will be there, and Mrs. Miller wants to make sure you're being a gentleman about everything." Nate set down his cup. "Tell Mrs. Miller thank you, but no." "She said you'd say that." Lily hopped down from the chair. "She also said if you don't come, she'll march up here and drag you down herself, and you know she'll do it." Nate did know. Mrs. Miller was the only person in Timber Falls who was not afraid of him. She had decided 7 years ago that he needed looking after, and there was no arguing with her. "Fine." The word came out like a curse. "Tell her I'll be there." Lily beamed. "Good. Wear something nice and wash your face. You look like a bear." She was out the door before he could respond, running back down the mountain with the same energy she had brought up it. Nate stood alone in his cabin. Pot roast at Mrs. Miller's meant sitting at a table with Clara Hartford. Meant lying to her face again. Meant pretending to be Samuel Grant, a man who did not exist, while the real Nathaniel Kane stood there with blood on his hands and a secret that would destroy her. He looked at the handkerchief on the table. He should run. Pack his things, head deeper into the mountains, find some other place where no one knew his name or his sins. But he was tired of running, and maybe some small broken part of him wanted to be caught. That evening, Nate walked down to Timber Falls. He had washed, shaved, put on his one decent shirt. He felt like an imposter, like a man playing dress-up in someone else's life. Mrs. Miller's boarding house sat at the edge of town, a 2-story building with yellow curtains in the windows and smoke rising from the chimney. Nate stood outside for a long moment before he knocked. Mrs. Miller opened the door. She was a short, round woman in her 50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that saw too much. "Mr. Grant?" she smiled. Come in. You're right on time." The dining room was warm, filled with the smell of roasting meat and baking bread. A long table dominated the space set for 6. Lily sat at one end, swinging her legs. 2 other boarders minors Nate recognized from town occupied the middle seats. And at the far end, Clara Hartford stood by the window looking out at the darkening street. She turned when Nate entered. Her face lit up. "Mr. Grant, I'm so glad you came." She wore a simple dress, dark blue, with her hair pinned up. She looked different than she had on the mountain. More like the Boston lady she was, less like the half-frozen woman he had carried through the snow. "Miss Hartford?" Nate nodded. "You're looking better. Thanks to you." She moved toward him. "Mrs. Miller has been telling me what a hero you are, running into a blizzard to save a stranger. Just did what anyone would do." "That's not true." Clara's voice was soft. "Most people would have left me." "Thank you, truly." Mrs. Miller ushered them to the table. Nate found himself seated next to Clara, close enough that he could smell lavender again, could see the small scar on her left hand where she must have cut herself years ago. Dinner was pot roast and vegetables and fresh bread that tasted like heaven after months of his own cooking. The conversation flowed around him. The miners talked about their claims. Mrs. Miller asked Clara about Boston. Lily chattered about everything and nothing. Nate said almost nothing. He focused on his food, tried to ignore the way Clara would glance at him, tried not to notice the small smile she gave him when their eyes met. After dinner, Mrs. Miller sent the miners off to smoke and Lily to bed. Clara helped clear the table, but Mrs. Miller shooed her away. "You're still recovering, dear. Go sit by the fire. Mr. Grant will keep you company." Before Nate could protest, he was alone with Clara in the parlor. She settled into a chair by the fireplace. "I hope I'm not keeping you. I'm sure you have things to do." "It's fine." They sat in silence. The fire crackled. Outside, someone walked past, singing a drunken song. "I asked around town today." Clara's voice was quiet. "About Nathaniel Kane." Nate's whole body tensed. "Any luck? No one's heard of him, or if they have, they're not saying." She looked at the fire. "I'm starting to think maybe he doesn't exist. Maybe Thomas was mistaken. Maybe I came all this way for nothing. Maybe you should go home." The words came out before Nate could stop them. Clara looked at him surprised. "You think I should give up?" "I think some questions don't have answers, and chasing them will only hurt you more." "Is that what you did?" Clara's eyes were steady on his. "Is that why you're up on that mountain alone, because you're running from questions?" Nate stood. "I should go." "Wait." Clara stood too. "I'm sorry, that was rude. I just meant you seem like someone who understands. About loss. About needing to know." "I don't know anything." "You know something." Clara moved closer. "I can see it in your eyes. Every time I mention my brother, every time I talk about finding the truth, you look like you're in pain. Why come? Because I killed him. Because I'm the truth you're looking for. Because if you knew who I really was, you would hate me. I lost people in the war, too." The lie tasted like ash. "It brings up memories." Clara nodded slowly. "I understand. I'm sorry. I won't ask again." But she would. Nate knew she would. Because she was like him, like everyone who had survived something terrible. She could not let go. The questions would eat at her until she found answers or died trying. "I should really go." Nate moved toward the door. "Mr. Grant," Clara's voice stopped him. "Would you do me a favor?" He turned. "Would you tell me about the war, about what it was like? Thomas never would. He always said it was too dark, that I wouldn't understand. But I think maybe if I knew what he went through, I could understand why he died." The request was a knife in Nate's chest. It wasn't anything you'd want to hear about. "Try me." Nate looked at her standing there in the firelight, young and determined, and looking for pieces of her dead brother in a stranger's war stories. And he knew he could not do this, could not sit here and talk about the war, about Thomas, about any of it. The war was hell. His voice came out flat. Men died. Some of them deserved it. Most didn't. And when it was over, the ones who lived had to figure out how to keep living. That's all there is to know. He left before she could respond. The walk back up the mountain was cold and dark, and exactly what he needed. Nate walked fast, letting the exertion burn away the dinner, the conversation, the look on Clara's face when he shut her down. He made it to his cabin, built a fire, sat in his chair. The handkerchief was still on the table. Nate picked it up, held it in his hands. He was in trouble. Real trouble. Because somewhere between finding Clara in the snow and sitting next to her at dinner, something had shifted. She was not just Thomas Hartford's sister anymore. She was a person, a woman who smiled and asked questions and looked at him like he might be someone worth knowing. And that made everything worse, because when she found out the truth, it would not just be about justice or revenge or setting the record straight. It would be personal. It would be a betrayal. He had to tell her. He had to stop this before it went any further. Tomorrow. He would tell her tomorrow. But when morning came, Nate woke to the sound of laughter outside his cabin. He looked out the window and saw Lily and Clara walking up the path together. Clara carried a basket. Lily was talking, gesturing wildly, probably telling some elaborate story. They looked happy. Nate opened the door before they could knock. "Morning," Lily beamed at him. "I brought Miss Clara up. She wanted to thank you proper for saving her life, so she made you breakfast." Clara held up the basket. "I hope that's all right. Mrs. Miller let me use her kitchen. I made biscuits and jam. And I brought coffee." She looked nervous, hopeful, like a child offering a gift and praying it would be accepted. Nate stepped aside. "Come in." They laid out breakfast on his table. The biscuits were good, better than anything Nate could make. The jam was sweet. The coffee was strong. Lily chattered through the whole meal, filling the cabin with noise and energy. Clara watched Nate while he ate. "Is it okay, the biscuits?" "They're good. Not too dry. They're fine." She smiled, relaxed a little. After breakfast, Lily ran off to explore. She knew these woods as well as Nate did. Clara stayed, helped him clean up. Lily is wonderful. Clara washed the dishes in Nate's basin. "Mrs. Miller told me about her parents. It's terrible what she's been through. She's strong. She is. But she's also just a child. She needs people." Clara glanced at him. "It's good that you're here for her. I'm not here for anyone." "That's not true." Clara dried a plate. "You're here for Lily. You were here for me. You pretend to be alone, but you're not. Not really." Nate took the plate from her, put it away. Their hands brushed. Clara did not pull away. "Why did you really come up here?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. Clara was quiet for a moment. "I told you, to thank you." "That's not all," she smiled. "No, that's not all." She moved to the window, looked out at the mountains. "I wanted to see where you live. To understand how someone could choose this, all this silence and solitude. It seems so lonely." "It is." "Then why stay?" "Because I don't deserve anything else. Because I killed a good man, and this is my penance. Because if I stay up here, I can't hurt anyone else." "It's peaceful." The lie was easier than the truth. Clara turned to face him. "Is it really?" Nate met her eyes, saw understanding there, saw that she knew he was lying, that she saw through him the same way she probably saw through everyone. "No," the truth slipped out. "It's not peaceful, but it's what I deserve. Clara moved closer. Why would you say that? What did you do that was so terrible you think you deserve to suffer? Everything. I did everything. Old sins. Nate stepped back. Too old to talk about. That's what Thomas used to say. Clara's voice went soft. When he came home on leave, I'd ask him about the war and he'd say the same thing. Old sins. Too old to talk about. She paused. But they ate at him. I could see it. The guilt, the shame, whatever he carried, it was killing him even before they pulled that trigger. Nate could not breathe, so I think that's why he wrote that letter. Clara was still talking, working through thoughts out loud. He knew something was going to happen. He knew he was in danger, and he wanted me to find someone who could explain. Someone who understood what he went through. Nathaniel Kane. She looked at Nate. I think maybe you understand too, even if you won't talk about it. Nate forced himself to speak. You should go. Why, what are you afraid of? That you'll see me, that you'll know, that you'll hate me the way I hate myself. I'm not afraid. I just value my privacy. Liar. The word hung between them. Clara stepped closer. You're lying, just like you lied about your name. Nate's heart stopped. What? Your name? Clara's eyes were steady. Lily called you Nate this morning, not Samuel, Nate. The world tilted. It's short for Nathaniel, isn't it? Clara's voice was quiet. You're Nathaniel Kane. You have been this whole time. And you lied to me. The silence that followed Clara's words was absolute. Nate stood frozen, every muscle locked, every breath caught somewhere between his lungs and his throat. The cabin felt too small, suddenly the walls pressing in the air, too thin. Outside a bird called. Inside the truth hung between them like a blade. Clara watched him, waiting. He could deny it. He could tell her Lily was mistaken, that the girl had confused him with someone else, that his name really was Samuel Grant, and Nate was just a nickname from some other life. He could lie again, pile another falsehood on top of all the others, until the whole structure collapsed. Or he could tell the truth, part of it anyway. Yes, the word came out rough. My name is Nathaniel Kane. Clara's face went pale. You lied to me. I did. Why? Her voice shook. I came here looking for you. I told you I was looking for you, and you looked me in the eye and lied. Nate forced himself to meet her gaze. Because I knew why you came, and I knew I couldn't give you what you wanted. What I wanted was the truth about my brother. Some truths destroy people. That's not your decision to make. Clara's fists clenched at her sides. Thomas trusted you. He told me to find you. He said you were a good man. Was he wrong? The question was a knife. Nate turned away, looked out the window at the mountains that had been his prison and his sanctuary for 7 years. Your brother and I served together, same unit. I was there when he died. How did he die? They said he deserted, that he ran from battle and left men behind to die. They court-martialed him, found him guilty, executed him. But you don't believe that. Clara moved closer. Do you don't think he was a deserter? Nate closed his eyes. I don't know what to believe. Yes, you do. Clara's voice was fierce now. You know, that's why you're up here alone. That's why you have nightmares. You know Thomas was innocent, and they killed him anyway, and you couldn't stop it. Close enough. Close enough to the truth that Nate could nod without technically lying. There was nothing I could do. The decision was made before the trial even started. They needed someone to blame for what went wrong, and Thomas was convenient. Who gave the order? Clara demanded. Who decided he had to die? Colonel Marcus Shaw. The name tasted like poison. Clara absorbed this. Is he still alive? As far as I know. Then I need to find him. I need to make him tell me the truth. No. The word came out too hard. Nate turned to face her. You need to let this go. Shaw is a powerful man. You go after him, and you'll get nothing but more pain. I don't care. You should. Clara stepped close enough that Nate could see the fire in her eyes, the absolute determination that was her brother's determination, the same stubborn refusal to back down that had gotten Thomas killed. I've spent 5 years wondering if my brother died a coward, 5 years carrying shame that didn't belong to me. 5 years watching people whisper behind my back about the Hartford who deserted. I'm not letting it go. Not now. Not when I finally have a name, a place to start. Then you're a fool. Clara slapped him. The crack of her palm against his cheek echoed in the small cabin. Nate did not move. He deserved worse. Don't you dare. Clara's voice shook with rage. Don't you dare call me a fool for wanting justice for my brother. You were his friend, you served with him, and you've spent 7 years hiding on this mountain while his memory got dragged through the mud. You're the coward, not Thomas. You. She was right. God help him, she was absolutely right. I'm sorry. The words were inadequate. You're right. I should have fought for him. I should have done something. But I didn't, and I've lived with that every day since. Clara's anger crumbled into something worse. Grief. Raw and fresh, as if Thomas had died yesterday instead of 5 years ago. Just tell me one thing. Her voice broke. Did he suffer at the end? Nate closed his eyes, saw Thomas kneeling in the dirt, saw the blindfold they tied over his eyes, saw his own finger on the trigger. No. The lie came easily. It was quick. Clara nodded, wiped at her eyes. Thank you, for telling me that much at least. She turned to leave. Wait. Nate caught her arm. Stay, please. Let me tell you about him, about Thomas, about the man he was before everything went wrong. Clara looked at his hand on her arm, then at his face. Whatever she saw there made her pause. All right. She pulled away gently. Tell me. They sat. Nate poured coffee, neither of them drank, and he talked. He told her about Thomas Hartford, the soldier, the man who had arrived at Fort Benson Green and eager and convinced the war was going to be an adventure. The man who learned fast that war was nothing but mud and blood and men screaming for help that never came. He told her how Thomas had been the best scout in the unit, how he could read tracks like some men read books, how he moved through enemy territory like smoke. He told her about the time Thomas had pulled 3 wounded men out of a burning building, about the letters he wrote home every Sunday without fail, about the way he talked about his little sister back in Boston like she was the only good thing left in a world gone mad. He did not tell her about the end, about the accusations, the trial, the execution. That was too close to the bone, too close to the truth. Nate could not speak. Clara listened. Her face changed as he talked, softened, grew younger. She was seeing her brother through Nate's eyes, seeing the man she remembered before the uniform, and the distance and the death. He sounds exactly like I remember him. She smiled sad and small. Before the war he used to read to me every night. Poetry mostly, Whitman and Longfellow. He had the whole of Leaves of Grass memorized. She paused. Did he still do that, read poetry? Nate nodded. He carried a copy of Whitman in his pack. It was falling apart, pages held together with string. But he read from it every night before sleep, said it reminded him there was beauty somewhere even if he couldn't see it. I gave him that book. Clara's voice went soft. When he enlisted, I thought it would keep him safe, like a talisman. They sat in silence. The coffee went cold. Outside the sun moved across the sky, painting the cabin walls gold. Thank you, Clara finally spoke, for telling me about him, for letting me see him again just for a little while. You don't need me for that. He's in you, in the way you talk, the way you move. You're more like him than you know. Clara looked at him. Something shifted in her expression. Is that why you saved me? Because I reminded you of him? Yes, no, both. I saved you because you needed saving. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Clara stood, moved to the window, stood where Nate had stood 1,000 times looking out at the mountains. I should go. Mrs. Miller will worry. Stay. The words surprised them both. It's getting late. The walk down is dangerous in the dark. You can have the bed. I'll sleep by the fire. Clara turned. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Because. She looked at him. Because you're not what I expected, and I don't know what to do with that. What did you expect? Answers, closure, maybe revenge, if I'm honest. She wrapped her arms around herself. I didn't expect to like you. The confession hung between them. You shouldn't like me. Nate stood. You should hate me. I was there and I did nothing. That makes me as guilty as the men who gave the order. Maybe. Clara did not look away. Or maybe you're just human. Maybe we're all just doing the best we can with impossible choices. She crossed the cabin, stood close enough that Nate could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, could smell lavender and wood smoke, and something else, something that was just her. I'll stay. Her voice was quiet. But only because you're right about the walk being dangerous. That night passed slowly. Nate lay by the fire listening to Clara breathe in the bed across the room. She did not sleep. Neither did he. They lay in the darkness, both pretending, both aware of the other, both caught in something neither could name. When dawn came, they did not speak about it. The days that followed fell into a pattern neither of them planned, but both accepted. Clara stayed. She said it was because the weather turned bad again, because Mrs. Miller's boarding house was too noisy, because she wanted to learn more about Thomas from the man who knew him. But they both knew those were excuses. She stayed because she wanted to, and Nate let her stay because he was not strong enough to send her away. They worked together. Nate showed her how to set snares, how to read the mountain's moods, how to split wood so it burned clean. Clara cooked, cleaned, brought life into a cabin that had been more tomb than home for 7 years. She found Nate's books, asked him to read aloud in the evenings. His voice was rough from disuse, but she said she liked it anyway. Lily visited often. She adored Clara, followed her around like a puppy, asked endless questions about Boston and what it was like to live in a real city with real shops and real ladies in fancy dresses. Clara answered every question with patience Nate did not know anyone possessed. 2 months passed. Spring came to the mountains, turning snow to water to mud, mud to the first green shoots of new life. The world woke up, and Nate, who had been sleeping for 7 years, woke with it. He fell in love without meaning to, without wanting to. But it happened anyway, as inevitable as spring following winter. He fell in love with the way Clara hummed while she cooked, with the serious expression she got when she read, with the laugh she gave Lily's jokes, bright and surprised, like she had forgotten she knew how to laugh. He fell in love with her stubbornness, her fierce loyalty to a brother 5 years dead, her refusal to let the world tell her who she should be. He fell in love, and it was the worst thing that could have happened, because eventually she would learn the truth, and then this fragile thing between them would shatter. One afternoon in late April, Nate took Clara to a clearing high up the mountain. The snow had melted here first, and wildflowers carpeted the ground in impossible colors. Clara gasped when she saw it. "It's beautiful." Thomas loved this place. The words slipped out. He found it one summer when we were training nearby. He said it was the only place that still felt clean. Clara walked among the flowers. Her fingers brushed the petals. "Will you teach me something?" "What?" "How to shoot." She turned to face him. "If I'm going to find Shaw, I need to know how to protect myself." Nate's gut twisted. "You're still planning to go after him?" "Of course. It's suicide. It's justice. It's revenge. There's a difference." Clara's jaw set. "Will you teach me or not?" Nate should have said no, should have refused. But he found himself nodding. They spent the afternoon with his rifle. Nate showed her how to hold it, how to breathe, how to let the shot surprise her instead of forcing it. She was terrible at first, flinching at the noise jerking the barrel, but she learned. By sunset, she could hit a target at 50 yards. "You're a natural." Nate took the rifle back. Thomas would be proud. Clara smiled. Then, without warning, she kissed him. It was brief, barely more than a brush of lips, but it burned through Nate like fire. Clara pulled back. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that." Nate could not speak, could not breathe, could not think. "Say something." Clara's voice was small. "Please." He should tell her no, should tell her this was impossible, that she did not know what she was doing, that he was the last man on earth she should want. Instead, he kissed her back. This kiss was not brief. It was deep and desperate, and tasted like spring and grief and all the things Nate had thought he would never feel again. Clara gasped, pressed closer. Her hands found his face, his hair. Nate pulled her against him, felt her heart beating against his chest, felt alive for the first time in 7 years. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara rested her forehead against his. "I know this is complicated." Her voice shook. "I know we barely know each other. I know I came here looking for answers about my brother, and this isn't that. But I can't help how I feel. Neither can I." The confession tore out of Nate. "God help me, neither can I." They stood in the clearing as the sun set, holding each other, both knowing this was a mistake, both unable to let go. They walked back to the cabin in silence. The air between them felt electric, charged with possibility and danger. That night, Clara did not take the bed. She sat with Nate by the fire. They did not kiss again. They did not need to. Something had shifted, become real, and now they both had to figure out what to do with it. "Tell me about after the war." Clara broke the silence. "How did you end up here?" Nate stared into the flames. "I didn't know where else to go. After Thomas died, after everything fell apart, I just started walking. Walked until I found a mountain tall enough that I couldn't hear the screaming anymore." "Does it work?" The silence. "Sometimes." He looked at her. "Less so lately." Clara smiled. "Because I won't stop talking. Because you make me want to talk back." They sat until the fire burned low. Then Clara stood, moved to the bed. But before she lay down, she turned back. "Nathaniel!" It was the first time she had used his real name. "Yeah. I'm glad I found you." The word stuck in Nate's throat. "I'm glad you did too." It was the truth. And the lie. He was glad and terrified and drowning in guilt because she had found him, and she did not know what that meant. Did not know that the man she was falling for was the man who had destroyed her life. The next morning, Reverend Pruitt arrived. Nate saw him coming up the trail, the old man's familiar figure unmistakable even at a distance. Pruitt made the trek once a month, had done so for 7 years, determined to save Nate's soul, whether Nate wanted it saved or not. Clara was outside hanging laundry on a line Nate had strung between 2 trees. She looked up when Pruitt appeared, gave him the same warm smile she gave everyone. "Good morning, Reverend." Pruitt stopped dead. His eyes went from Clara to the cabin to Nate standing in the doorway, and understanding dawned on his weathered face. "Miss Hartford, I presume?" Clara blinked, surprised. "You know who I am. I know the name Hartford, and I can see the resemblance." Pruitt's voice was gentle. "You have your brother's eyes." Clara's smile faded. "You knew Thomas." "I knew of him." Pruitt glanced at Nate. "Nathaniel and I have had many long conversations about the war. Your brother's name came up more than once." Nate stepped forward. "Reverend, maybe we should talk." "Indeed." Pruitt's tone was mild, but his eyes were sharp. "Inside, perhaps." Nate led Pruitt into the cabin. Clara started to follow, but Pruitt gently stopped her. "If you don't mind, Miss Hartford, I need to speak with Nathaniel alone. Church business." Clara looked confused, but nodded. "Of course." Inside, Pruitt closed the door, turned to Nate. "You have to tell her." "I know." "Do you—" Pruitt's voice was hard now, all gentleness gone. "Because from where I stand, you're courting that girl without telling her you killed her brother. That's not just a lie, Nathaniel, that's a sin." "I'm going to tell her." "When?" "Soon." "That's what you said last month, and the month before." Pruitt moved to the window, looked out at Clara hanging laundry. "She's a good woman. She deserves the truth. The truth will destroy her. The lie will destroy her more. And it will destroy you too." Pruitt turned back. "I've watched you suffer for 7 years. I've listened to your confessions, your guilt, your prayers for forgiveness, and I've told you the same thing every time. God can forgive you. But you have to forgive yourself first, and you can't do that until you stop running." Nate sank into his chair. "I love her." The words hung in the air. Pruitt's expression softened. "I know. That's what makes this so hard." But that's also why you have to tell her. Love built on lies isn't love. It's just another prison. If I tell her, she'll hate me. Maybe. Or maybe she'll surprise you. Pruitt put a hand on Nate's shoulder. Either way, she deserves to make that choice with all the facts. Don't you think Thomas would want that for his sister? The truth, no matter how hard, Nate thought about Thomas, about the man he had been, about his absolute commitment to honesty, to doing the right thing, even when it cost him everything. Thomas would want Clara to know, even if it destroyed Nate. Even if it destroyed them both. I'll tell her. Nate's words came out broken. Tonight. I'll tell her everything. Pruitt nodded. I'll pray for you both. He left. Nate sat alone in the cabin, staring at nothing, trying to figure out how to put into words the worst thing he had ever done. That afternoon passed in a blur. Clara made lunch. Nate could not eat. She asked if he was feeling well. He said he was fine. The lie tasted like ash. As sunset approached, Nate made a decision. He would tell her. But first, he needed to show her. Come with me. He stood. There's something you need to see. Clara followed him to the corner of the cabin. Nate knelt, pried up a loose floorboard. Underneath was a metal box. His fingers trembled as he pulled it out. What is that? Clara asked. The truth. He opened the box. Inside were things he had kept hidden for 7 years. His old uniform, his sniper's medal, letters from men in his unit, most of them dead now, and at the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, a photograph. Nate unwrapped it slowly, handed it to Clara. What is this? She took it, looked down. Then she went very, very still. The photograph was old-faded but clear enough. It showed a group of men in uniform. An execution detail. 5 soldiers standing at attention with rifles, and in the center, slightly apart, a man with a sniper rifle. That man was Nate. In the background, blurry but recognizable, a figure knelt, hands tied, head bowed, waiting to die. Clara gasped. No. The word was barely a whisper. No, this isn't. But she could see it was, could see the truth in every horrible detail. She looked up at Nate. Her face had gone white. You were the executioner. Not a question, a statement. You killed Thomas. Nate could not speak, could only nod. The photograph fell from Clara's hands. You knew, her voice shook. You knew who I was, from the very first moment. You saw my name and you knew I was his sister, and you saved me anyway. You brought me here, you let me fall in love with you, and all this time, you were the one who killed him. Clara, please. Don't, she backed away. Don't say my name, don't you dare. Tears streamed down her face, now hot and fast. He trusted you. He called you a good man. He told me to find you, and you're the one who murdered him. I followed orders. The excuse was pathetic, and Nate knew it. I didn't know he was innocent. You didn't care, Clara's voice broke on a sob. You pointed your rifle at a man who was begging for his life, and you pulled the trigger, and you didn't care enough to ask if maybe, just maybe, the army was wrong. She was right. God help him, she was absolutely right. I'm sorry. Inadequate. Worthless. Clara, I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't bring him back. She looked at him with such hatred that Nate felt it like a physical blow. Sorry doesn't give me back my brother. Sorry doesn't undo 7 years of grief and shame and wondering if he died a coward when all along he died innocent. And you knew, and you said nothing. I didn't know he was innocent, not then. But you know now, don't you? You found out later and you still said nothing. You still hid up here on your mountain feeling sorry for yourself instead of clearing his name. Clara grabbed the photograph, shoved it in her pocket. I'm going to find Shaw. I'm going to make him tell everyone what really happened. And when I do, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did too, that you killed an innocent man, that you're not a hero or a victim or whatever you've convinced yourself you are. You're a murderer. She ran. Nate heard her stumbling down the mountain path in the gathering dark. Every instinct screamed at him to follow, to stop her, to explain. But there was no explanation that would matter, no words that would change what he had done. He stood alone in his cabin, picked up the box, put it away. Outside night fell. Nate sat in the darkness and waited for the grief to hit. But it did not come. He felt nothing, just empty, just hollow. He had told the truth, and it had destroyed everything, just like he knew it would. Clara ran until her lungs burned and her legs gave out. She collapsed at the base of a pine tree, gasping for air, and let the sobs take her. Great heaving cries that came from somewhere deep and broken. She cried for Thomas, for herself, for the man she had thought Nathaniel was, and the monster he actually turned out to be. She cried until there was nothing left. When she finally looked up, full night had fallen. The path down the mountain was invisible in the darkness. Clara was lost. She should have been afraid, should have worried about freezing or getting attacked by wolves or falling off a cliff, but she could not find it in herself to care. Let the mountain take her. At least then she would be with Thomas. But the mountain did not take her. Instead, a light appeared through the trees, a lantern swinging as someone walked toward her. Clara scrambled to her feet, ready to run again. "Miss Hartford," a familiar voice. "Is that you?" Reverend Pruitt emerged from the darkness. He held the lantern high, and his face was kind and worried, and so full of compassion that Clara almost started crying again. "I was on my way home when I heard someone running. Are you hurt?" Clara shook her head, could not speak. Pruitt took in her tear-stained face, her shaking body. "Come with me. The church isn't far. You can warm up, catch your breath." He did not ask questions, just led her through the trees to a small white church on the edge of Timber Falls. Inside, he lit more lanterns, stoked the fire in the wood stove, wrapped a blanket around Clara's shoulders. "Tea," he offered. Clara nodded. They sat in the front pew while water boiled. The church was simple, beautiful in its plainness. Wooden walls, a cross above the altar, nothing else. "He told you," Pruitt's voice was gentle, "about Thomas." Clara's fists clenched. "You knew, all this time you knew what he did." "I did." "And you said nothing. You let me walk around town asking about Nathaniel Kane, and you never thought to mention he was the man hiding on the mountain. It wasn't my truth to tell." Pruitt poured tea, handed her a cup. "Nathaniel came to me 7 years ago, half dead from guilt, barely human. He told me everything, what he'd done, what it cost him, and he asked me to help him find God again if God would still have him." "And did you help him find God?" "I tried." Pruitt sipped his own tea. "But you can't find God when you're running from yourself, and Nathaniel has been running for a very long time." Clara set down her cup, pulled out the photograph, laid it on the pew between them. "He killed my brother." Pruitt looked at the photograph. Pain crossed his weathered face. "He did." "How am I supposed to forgive that?" "I don't know." Pruitt's honesty was startling. "I've spent 7 years praying over that question, trying to understand how God can ask us to forgive the unforgivable, and I still don't have a good answer." "Then why do you keep helping him? Why do you visit him, pray with him, treat him like he's worth saving?" Pruitt was quiet for a long moment. "Can I show you something?" He stood, moved to a small door behind the altar, opened it. Inside was a tiny room, barely more than a closet. On the wall hung a photograph, a young man in uniform, smiling, proud. "My son." Pruitt's voice was thick. "Daniel, he died at Gettysburg. 20 years old." Clara stood, moved closer. "I'm sorry." "So am I." Pruitt touched the frame gently. "After he died, I was angry, at God, at the war, at the men who sent my boy to die. I carried that anger for years, let it eat at me until there was nothing left but hate and grief." He turned to Clara. "And then one day a young soldier came to my church. He was broken, haunted, barely alive. And he told me he had killed a man, an innocent man, and he didn't know how to live with what he'd done." "Nathaniel," Pruitt nodded. "I wanted to hate him, wanted to throw him out, tell him God had no mercy for men like him. But when I looked at him, I saw my son. I saw Daniel in that uniform, following orders, doing what he was told was right. And I realized if my son had lived, he might have been the one sitting in my church confessing to killing innocent men. Because that's what war does. It takes good people and turns them into killers. Clara looked at the photograph of Pruitt's son, saw the same eyes as the Reverend, the same gentle smile. So I helped him, Pruitt continued, not because what he did was forgivable, but because I couldn't save my son, and maybe, just maybe, I could save this broken soldier, and maybe in saving him I could forgive the men who killed Daniel. Did it work? Clara's voice was small. Did you forgive them? I'm still trying. Pruitt smiled sadly. Some days are better than others, but I keep trying, because the alternative is drowning in hate, and I've seen what that does to people. It destroys them from the inside. They went back to the pew, sat in silence. Clara picked up the photograph again, looked at Nathaniel standing there with his rifle, looked at Thomas in the background waiting to die. I don't know how to let go of this. Her voice broke. Thomas was everything to me, and Nathaniel took him away. How do I forgive that? You start by understanding. Pruitt put a hand on hers. Nathaniel isn't a monster. He's a man who made a terrible choice in an impossible situation. He's lived with the consequences every day since, and he's suffered for it in ways you can't imagine. Good. The word came out harsh. He should suffer. Should he? Pruitt's voice was quiet. Will his suffering bring Thomas back? Will it ease your pain? Clara had no answer. I'm not asking you to forgive him. Pruitt stood. I'm just asking you to consider that maybe, just maybe, there's more to this story than you know. And maybe before you decide Nathaniel is beyond redemption, you should hear all of it. He went to a cabinet, pulled out a journal, old leather-bound, filled with neat handwriting. Nathaniel has been keeping this since the day Thomas died. He writes in it every night, prayers mostly, confessions, attempts to make sense of what he did. Pruitt held it out. He wouldn't mind you reading it. I think part of him has been waiting for you to find it. Clara took the journal, opened it to a random page. The handwriting was cramped, desperate. I see his face every night. He said, I'm innocent. I didn't believe him. God forgive me, I didn't believe him. I see his eyes through the scope. I see him mouth the words, please don't. I pulled the trigger anyway. I pulled the trigger and I ended a good man's life, and I don't know how to live with that. I don't know how to keep breathing when every breath feels like a betrayal. Thomas Hartford deserved better. His sister deserves better. Everyone deserves better than what I am. Clara's fingers gripped the journal so hard the leather creaked. She flipped to another entry. 7 years today. 7 years since I killed him. I thought time would make it easier. It doesn't. It just makes the guilt heavier. I wake up and for one beautiful moment I forget. Then I remember. And the weight crushes me all over again. I don't know why I keep living. Punishment maybe. Penance. Or maybe I'm just too much of a coward to end it. Thomas was brave. He died with dignity. I live with none. Page after page. 7 years of guilt and grief and self-hatred so deep it made Clara's own pain look small. She closed the journal, handed it back to Pruitt. He's been punishing himself. Not a question. Every day. Pruitt put the journal away. Living alone on that mountain. No company, no comfort, no joy. Just silence and guilt and the memory of what he did. That's not living. That's dying slowly. Clara stood, moved to the window. Outside, Timber Falls slept peacefully under a blanket of stars. What am I supposed to do with this? She turned back to Pruitt. I came here for justice, for answers. And instead, I fell in love with the man who killed my brother. How am I supposed to make sense of that? You love him. Pruitt's voice was gentle. Even now, even knowing what he did. Clara wanted to deny it, wanted to say she hated Nathaniel Kane with every fiber of her being, but it would be a lie. I don't want to love him. The confession hurt. But I do, and I hate myself for it. Don't. Pruitt moved beside her. Love isn't something you control, it just happens. And the fact that you can still feel it, even through all this pain, that's not a weakness. That's proof you're stronger than you know. Clara closed her eyes. Let the tears come again, quieter this time. What do? I can't answer that, but I can tell you what Thomas would want. Pruitt's voice was firm. He would want you to find peace, not revenge, not justice, peace. And peace doesn't come from making Nathaniel suffer more than he already has. It comes from deciding that the past doesn't get to define your future. They stood together in the quiet church. Outside, a new day was beginning to dawn. "Will you stay here tonight?" Pruitt asked. "I have a room in the back. Nothing fancy, but it's warm and safe." Clara nodded. She was too tired to walk anywhere else, too tired to think, too tired to feel. Pruitt showed her to a small room with a narrow bed and a window that looked out at the mountains, at Nathaniel's mountain. Clara lay down but did not sleep. She stared at the ceiling and tried to untangle the mess of emotions in her chest. Grief for Thomas, anger at Nathaniel, love for the man Nathaniel had pretended to be, confusion about the man he actually was. She thought about the journal, about 7 years of self-inflicted punishment, about a man so consumed by guilt he had exiled himself from humanity. She thought about Thomas, about what he would say if he could see her now. Thomas had been the kindest person she knew. He believed in second chances, in forgiveness, in the possibility of redemption. Would he want her to hate Nathaniel, or would he want her to understand that Nathaniel was as much a victim of the war as Thomas had been? Clara did not know. And Thomas was not here to ask. She finally fell asleep as the sun rose. When she woke, it was afternoon. She found Pruitt in the church reading. "There's food in the kitchen." He looked up. "And Mrs. Miller stopped by. She knows you're safe." "Thank you." Clara ate mechanically. Then she sat with Pruitt and they talked. About Thomas, about the war, about forgiveness and grief and all the impossible questions that had no good answers. And slowly, Clara began to understand something. Nathaniel had not killed Thomas out of malice. He had killed him because he was a soldier following orders, because he trusted his commanding officers, because in war you did what you were told or men died. It did not make what he did right, but it made him human instead of a monster. Clara left the church as the sun set. She should return to Mrs. Miller's boarding house, sleep, process everything Pruitt had told her. But her feet carried her elsewhere, up the mountain path, through darkening trees, her body moving on instinct toward something she could not name. She found Nate where she somehow knew he would be, at Thomas's grave. He sat in the grass back against the headstone, staring at nothing. A bottle sat beside him untouched. He did not turn when she approached, but he spoke. "You should not be here." Clara sat beside him without asking. Close enough their shoulders touched. Neither pulled away. They sat in complete silence. No words, no explanations, no apologies, no accusations. Just two people beside a grave in the Montana twilight, sharing grief too immense for language. The stars came out one by one. A coyote called in the distance. The wind moved through pine branches overhead. The mountain breathed around them, patient and ancient and indifferent to human pain. Nate's hand found hers in the darkness. Clara did not pull away. Their fingers intertwined, and they sat like that for an hour, maybe more. Time lost meaning. Above them, the Milky Way spilled across the sky like spilled milk. Around them, night deepened. Between them, something shifted. Something neither could name but both could feel. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first fragile possibility of it. After a long time, Nate finally spoke. "He would have liked you." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "I would have liked him. I wish I could have known him as a man, seen who he became. He became a hero, and they killed him for it. No." Clara turned to look at Nate's profile in the starlight. "They killed his body. But his legacy lives on. In you, in me, in everyone who loved him." Nate said nothing, but his grip on her hand tightened. They sat until the cold drove them apart. Clara stood first, reluctant to break the spell. "I do not forgive you yet," she said quietly. "I do not know if I ever can. But I do not hate you either, not anymore. I just need time." Nate looked up at her. "Take all the time you need. I will be here." Clara walked back down the mountain alone, but for the first time since discovering the truth she felt something other than rage. She felt the first tentative stirrings of peace. That afternoon, a visitor arrived. Clara heard voices in the church. Pruitt talking to someone. A man's voice, cultured, authoritative. She emerged from the back room to find Pruitt speaking with an older man in an expensive suit. Military bearing, gray hair, cold eyes. The man turned when Clara appeared. His expression changed to something calculating. "Miss Hartford," he stepped forward. "Colonel Marcus Shaw. I've been looking for you." Clara's blood went cold. Shaw, the man who had ordered Thomas's execution. "What do you want?" Her voice was steady despite the fear. "To talk." Shaw's smile did not reach his eyes. "About your brother, about the questions you've been asking all over Montana, about Nathaniel Kane." "How do you know about that? I make it my business to know things." Shaw gestured to a pew. "Please, sit. This won't take long." Clara looked at Pruitt. He gave a small nod. "Stay calm. Be careful." She sat. Shaw sat across from her. "I know why you're here." Shaw folded his hands. "You want to clear your brother's name. You think he was innocent, and you might be right." The careful phrasing hit Clara like a punch. "What do you mean, might be?" "I mean I gave the order based on the evidence I had at the time. Captain Morrison reported that Lieutenant Hartford had deserted his post. I had no reason to doubt him." Shaw's voice was matter of fact. "If the evidence was fabricated, I had no way of knowing." Clara could not breathe. "You're saying you might have executed an innocent man, and you're just going to walk away." "I'm saying war is messy. Mistakes happen. Good men die." Shaw leaned forward. "You can keep digging. Keep asking questions. Eventually you might find something that proves your brother was innocent. But if you do, you won't just destroy me. You'll destroy 20 other men. Good men. Family men. Men who served their country and made decisions based on imperfect information. They killed my brother. They followed orders, just like Nathaniel Kane followed orders." Shaw's eyes were cold. "You want to punish someone, fine. But understand what you're doing. You'll ruin lives. You'll tear apart families. And for what? To prove something you already believe in your heart." Clara stood. "Get out." "I'm not finished." Shaw stood too. "I'm prepared to offer you something, money, enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life. A full written apology, private but official, and information about your brother's last days that might bring you peace. That's what I can give you. What I'm asking in return is that you let this go. Stop asking questions. Go back to Boston. Live your life." "You think I want money. I think you want closure." Shaw pulled out a card. "You have 1 week to decide. After that, the offer expires." He left. Clara stood shaking with rage and grief and confusion. Pruitt came to her side. "Are you all right? He's trying to buy my silence." Clara's voice broke. "He admitted Thomas might have been innocent, and now he's trying to pay me off." What are you going to do? Clara did not know. That evening, as she sat in the church trying to decide, someone burst through the door. Mrs. Miller, face pale, breathing hard. "Miss Hartford, thank God, you need to come quickly." "What's wrong?" "It's Lily. She's run away, and we think she might have gone up the mountain to Nathaniel's cabin." Clara's heart stopped. Why would she do that? She heard people talking about you and Nathaniel, about what happened. She's convinced you're going to take him away, that they'll hang him for what he did. Mrs. Miller grabbed Clara's arm. "She's just a child. She doesn't understand. But if she's on that mountain in the dark, she could die." Clara was already moving. "Where's Nathaniel?" "He's searching, but he can't find her. He asked if you could help, said you're the only one she might listen to." Clara ran. 3 days had passed since Clara left Nate's cabin. 3 days of staying at Reverend Pruitt's church, reading Nate's journal, wrestling with impossible questions about forgiveness and justice, and what Thomas would have wanted. She was no closer to an answer. That evening, as she sat in the church trying to decide what to do next, Mrs. Miller burst through the door. Miss Hartford, thank God. You need to come quickly. Clara stood. What is wrong? It is Lily. Mrs. Miller's face was pale. She has run away. We think she went up the mountain, to Nathaniel's cabin. Clara's heart stopped. Why would she do that? She heard people talking in town about you and Nathaniel, about what happened. She is convinced you are going to turn him in, that they will hang him for what he did. Mrs. Miller grabbed Clara's arm. She is just a child. She does not understand. But if she is on that mountain in the dark, she could die. Clara was already moving toward the door. Where is Nathaniel? He is searching. But he cannot find her. He asked if you could help, said you are the only one she might listen to. The mountain was black under a moonless sky. Clara ran up the trail, her lungs burning her legs, screaming in protest. Behind her, Mrs. Miller had fallen back, unable to keep pace. Ahead, somewhere in the darkness, a 12-year-old girl was lost and terrified and possibly dying. Clara called out between gasping breaths, "Lily, Lily, can you hear me?" Nothing but wind answered. She pushed harder, ignoring the pain, ignoring the voice in her head that said she should slow down, that breaking her neck on these rocks would not help anyone. All she could think about was Lily's face, bright and trusting, asking Clara to stay, to not take Nate away. A light appeared through the trees, a lantern swinging as someone moved toward her. Nathaniel emerged from the darkness. He looked worse than Clara had ever seen him, haggard, desperate. His eyes met hers, and something passed between them unspoken but understood. They could deal with their own pain later. Right now, a child needed them. I searched the North Ridge. His words came rough from shouting. Nothing. You take the east trail toward the falls. I will check the old mine shaft. Clara nodded, started to turn. Clara? Nate caught her arm. Be careful, please. She looked at his hand on her arm, at his face in the lantern light. 3 days ago she had hated him, had wanted him to suffer. Now all she felt was a confusing tangle of grief and anger and something that still impossibly felt like love. I will, she pulled away gently, find her Nathaniel. They separated. Clara moved east, her own lantern throwing wild shadows across the rocks. The trail here was treacherous, narrow paths that skirted sheer drops. One wrong step and you were gone. She called Lily's name until her voice went raw. And then finally she heard it. A sound, faint, a sob maybe, or a cry. Clara stopped, listened hard. There, again, coming from somewhere below the trail. She moved to the edge, held her lantern out over the drop. The light barely penetrated the darkness, but she could make out shapes. Rocks, trees clinging to the cliff face. And there, maybe 20 feet down, a small figure huddled on a narrow ledge. Lily, the figure moved, looked up. Miss Clara? The voice was small, terrified. I am stuck. I cannot get back up. Clara's heart hammered. The ledge was barely wide enough for Lily to sit on. One wrong move and she would fall another 100 feet onto rocks that would not forgive. Do not move, Clara kept her voice calm. I am coming to get you. She looked around frantically. The cliff face was too steep to climb down without rope, but there was a stunted pine growing out of the rock a few feet away. If she could tie her belt and coat together, create a makeshift line, she might be able to reach Lily. Clara worked fast, tied her belt to her coat sleeve, knotted it around the pine, tested the strength. It would have to do. She lowered herself over the edge. The descent was nightmare. Every handhold felt loose. Every foothold threatened to give way. Clara's muscles burned and her hands bled from gripping rough stone. But she kept going inch by terrible inch until she reached the ledge where Lily waited. The girl threw her arms around Clara's neck. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I just wanted to run away where no one could find me, and then I fell, and I could not get back up, and I thought I was going to die. You are not going to die. Clara held her tight. I have got you, but we need to climb back up. Can you do that? Lily nodded against Clara's shoulder. Getting up was harder than getting down. Clara had to push Lily ahead of her, supporting the girl's weight while finding purchase on slick rock. Her arms shook. Her grip slipped. Once Lily's foot knocked loose a stone, and they both hung suspended for a terrible moment before Clara found another handhold. They were almost at the top when Clara heard Nathaniel's voice. "Do not move." She looked up. Nate lay on his stomach at the cliff edge, reaching down. His face was white in the lantern light. "Lily first." Clara pushed the girl up. "Get her to safety." Nate caught Lily's arms, hauled her up and over, set her down behind him. Then he reached for Clara. "Give me your hand." Clara reached up. Their fingers touched. Nate's hand closed around her wrist, strong and sure. He pulled. Clara scrambled for footing, and then she was up over the edge on solid ground, safe. She lay on her back, breathing hard, staring at stars that had finally appeared between broken clouds. Beside her, Nate was checking Lily over, making sure she was not injured. The girl was crying, apologizing over and over. "I did not mean to cause trouble. I just did not want them to take you away." "No one is taking me anywhere." Nate's words were rough with emotion. "You understand, I am not leaving you." "But Miss Clara said you killed someone, and people who kill people get hanged." Nate went very still, looked at Clara. She sat up slowly, moved to kneel beside Lily. "I was angry when I said that, and scared. But I was wrong." The words came from somewhere deep, somewhere Clara had not known existed. "Nate is not a bad man. He made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but that does not mean he deserves to die. It means he deserves a chance to make things right." Lily looked between them. "So you're not going to turn him in?" Clara met Nate's eyes, saw hope there, fragile and desperate. "No." She said it to Lily but meant it for Nate. "I am not going to turn him in." They walked back to town together. Nate carried Lily, who had fallen asleep, against his shoulder. Clara walked beside them, close enough that their arms brushed with each step. They did not speak. There was too much to say, and no way to say it yet. But something had shifted between them. Some wall had cracked. At the edge of Timber Falls, Mrs. Miller waited with half the town. She took Lily from Nate's arms, checked the girl over, then pulled both Nate and Clara into an embrace that smelled like bread and lavender and home. "Thank you both. Thank God you found her." The townspeople dispersed. Mrs. Miller took Lily inside, and Clara and Nate stood alone in the street as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. "I should go." Nate's voice was quiet. "Back to the mountain." "Wait." Clara touched his arm. "We need to talk, really talk, about everything." "What is left to say? You know what I did. You know I cannot undo it. You know I have spent 7 years wishing I could." "I know." Clara's hand stayed on his arm. "But I also know something else now. I know my brother would not want me to hate you. He would not want either of us to keep suffering for something that has already happened. He would want us to find a way forward." Nate looked at her like she had spoken in a language he did not understand. "How can you forgive this?" "I have not yet. I do not know if I ever fully can." Clara's honesty was painful. "But I can try. And I think that is what Thomas would want, for both of us to try." The sun broke over the mountains, painting the world gold. "I need to do something first." Clara stepped back. "Before I can move forward, I need to find the truth, the real truth, about what happened to Thomas. Will you help me?" Nate studied her face. "What changed?" "I realized something when we were searching for Lily. Thomas did not die so I could spend my life hating the man who pulled the trigger. He died because he tried to expose corruption. The least I can do is finish what he started." Nate nodded slowly. "Where do we start?" "The Territorial Archives. If there is evidence, it will be there." They spent the next 3 days combing through every document they could find. Nate still had papers from his military service. Clara visited the Territorial Archives in Timber Falls. Reverend Pruitt helped using his connections to request files from Fort Benson. The work was tedious. Hours of reading through old reports, supply ledgers, correspondence. Clara's eyes burned. Her back ached, but she kept going. On the 3rd day, she found it, hidden in a box of old correspondence that had been misfiled and forgotten. A letter, written by a private named William Chen in Thomas's unit. Clara's hands shook as she unfolded it. March 15, 1876. I am writing this in case I do not survive the war. Someone needs to know the truth about what happened to Lieutenant Thomas Hartford. Hartford was not a deserter. He discovered that Captain James Morrison was selling Army rifles to the Lakota. Morrison was Colonel Shaw's nephew. When Hartford tried to report the theft, Morrison accused him of desertion first. Shaw believed his nephew because blood is thicker than truth. But I was there. I saw Morrison loading the rifles onto a wagon. I heard him negotiate the price with the Lakota scout. I saw Hartford try to stop him. Morrison had Hartford arrested before he could talk. The court-martial was a sham. They executed a good man to protect a thief. I am writing this because if I die, someone should know. Thomas Hartford was innocent. He died a hero, and the Army killed him for it. The letter was dated 2 weeks after Thomas's execution. According to military records, Private William Chen had died in battle 3 days after writing it. The letter had never been sent. Clara read it 3 times, tears streaming down her face. This is it. This is the proof. That afternoon, she confronted Shaw. She found him at the hotel in Timber Falls, sitting in the lobby with a whiskey. He looked older than he had days before, tired, worn. Clara sat across from him without asking permission, slid the letter across the table. Shaw read it. His face went white, then gray. Where did you find this? Does it matter? Clara's voice was steel. It is proof. Proof you executed an innocent man to protect your nephew. Proof you have been lying for 7 years. Shaw set down the letter carefully. His hand shook slightly. Morrison is dead. Died in battle 6 months after Thomas. I thought the truth died with him. He looked at Clara. What do you want? The truth. All of it. In writing. Every detail. Every name. Every lie you told. Clara leaned forward. Or I take this letter to the War Department myself and let them sort it out. Your choice. Shaw studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. A bitter, exhausted sound. You are your brother's sister. Same fire. Same absolute refusal to let injustice stand. He drained his whiskey. Very well. I will write your confession, but I want something in return. You are in no position to negotiate. Hear me out. Shaw's voice was quiet. I will confess to everything. I will name Morrison. I will take full responsibility. I will resign and face whatever consequences come, but leave Nathaniel Kane out of it. Clara blinked, surprised. Why? Because he followed orders. He is not responsible for what I did, and because your brother asked me to in his last words before the execution. Shaw's eyes were distant. Thomas said, do not blame the man who pulls the trigger. Blame the man who gives the order. I have carried those words for 7 years. Maybe it is time I listened. Clara considered, then nodded once. Write the confession, leave Nate out, and resign. Today. Done. Shaw kept his word. By morning, his confession was written. By afternoon, copies were on their way to the War Department, to newspapers, to Thomas's former commanding officers. By evening, Shaw's resignation was official. The story spread through Timber Falls like wildfire. Thomas Hartford had been innocent, murdered by corrupt officers to protect a criminal, a hero, not a deserter. Clara stood in the church reading the telegram from the War Department. Full exoneration, full military honors, an official apology to the Hartford family for the injustice done. It should have felt like victory, but all Clara felt was tired. It is done. She handed the telegram to Pruitt. Thomas's name is cleared. How do you feel? Empty. Clara sank onto a pew. I thought this would fix everything, but he is still gone, and no amount of justice brings him back. Before Pruitt could respond, the church door opened. A man stood in the doorway, tall, imposing, in a dark traveling suit with silver hair and eyes the same brown as Clara's. His face was weathered, authoritative, the face of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Clara!" Clara stood slowly, her heart hammering. "Father." Judge Thomas Hartford Sr. crossed the church in long strides. For a moment Clara thought he would embrace her. Instead he stopped 3 feet away, studying her face as if memorizing it. "You look like your mother." His voice was gruff. "I have been searching for you for 8 months. How did you find me?" "Shaw sent me a telegram before he resigned. Said you deserved to know the whole truth." Judge Hartford's jaw tightened. "And he was right. You do." Pruitt stood quietly. "I will give you privacy." "No." Judge Hartford's voice stopped him. "You should hear this too, Reverend. You have been caring for my daughter. You deserve to know what kind of man I am." He sat heavily on a pew. Clara sat across from him, wary. "I have known the truth about Thomas for 3 years," Judge Hartford began without preamble. "Shaw came to me in 1878, confessed everything, the corruption, the frame-up, the execution. He said he needed my help covering it up." Clara's breath caught. "You knew I knew." Her father's voice was heavy with old shame. "Shaw had leverage, letters Thomas had written that could be misinterpreted as evidence of his guilt. Shaw said if I did not help him bury the truth, he would make sure those letters became public, that Thomas's name would be dragged through worse mud than a simple desertion charge." "So you chose to protect a lie?" Clara's voice shook. "I chose to protect you." Judge Hartford met her eyes. "Or so I told myself. I thought if the truth came out, if there was a scandal, you would be destroyed. You had already lost your brother. I could not bear for you to lose your future, too." "That was not your choice to make." "No, it was not." Her father's shoulders sagged. "I was a coward, Clara. I let fear control me, and I have regretted it every day since." Clara stood paced to the window. Outside, Timber Falls went about its business, unaware of the confession happening in the church. "Why are you here now?" She did not turn around. "Because Shaw's telegram told me you were doing what I should have done years ago, fighting for the truth, and because I brought you something." Clara heard rustling, turned to see her father pulling a thick folder from his travel bag. "For 3 years I have been gathering evidence, witness statements, financial records showing Morrison's embezzlement, correspondence proving Shaw knew about the corruption before Thomas's execution." He held out the folder. "This is everything you need, not just to clear Thomas's name, but to make sure Shaw and everyone involved faces full justice." Clara took the folder with numb hands. Inside were dozens of documents, official seals, sworn testimonies. "This is more than what I found." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I told you. I have been building a case for 3 years. I was going to do it myself. Expose Shaw. Clear Thomas' face whatever consequences came." Judge Hartford stood. "But then I heard you were here asking questions, and I realized something. You are braver than I ever was. You deserve to be the one who finishes this." Clara looked at her father, really looked at him, saw the grief carved into his face, the guilt in his eyes, the weight of 3 years of cowardice. "Why did you wait so long?" "Because I was afraid of losing my position, afraid of scandal, afraid of admitting I had failed my son." Her father's voice broke. "But you, Clara, you were not afraid. You came all the way to Montana. You found Nathaniel Kane. You dug up the truth. You did what I could not." He reached out, hesitated, then put his hand on her shoulder. "I am so proud of you, and I am so sorry for everything." Clara felt tears burning. She had been angry at her father for so long, angry that he let her believe Thomas was a coward, angry that he tried to control her life, tried to force her into a marriage she did not want. But looking at him now, she saw only a broken man who had made terrible choices and lived with the consequences. "I do not forgive you yet," she said quietly, "but I am glad you are here." Judge Hartford nodded. "That is more than I deserve." He stayed in Timber Falls for a week, used his position as a federal judge to ensure Shaw's confession reached the right people. testified himself about Shaw's attempt to manipulate him into silence. The scandal was enormous. Shaw was arrested, tried, and sentenced to prison for conspiracy and corruption. Other officers involved were dishonorably discharged, and Thomas Hartford was officially declared a hero. His name was cleared. His record expunged. The Army issued a formal apology. On the day the verdict came through, Clara and her father stood together at Thomas's grave. Judge Hartford knelt, placed his hand on the stone. "I failed you, son. I let them destroy your name, and I said nothing. But Clara, your sister, she did what I could not. She fought for you. She won." His voice broke. "I hope wherever you are, you can forgive me." Clara knelt beside her father, put her hand over his. "He would forgive you. Thomas always believed in second chances." They stayed there for a long time, father and daughter grieving together for the first time in 7 years. When they finally stood, Judge Hartford looked at Clara. "Will you come back to Boston? You have a home there, a life." "No," Clara's voice was gentle but firm. "My home is here now. My life is here, with Nate, with Lily, with the clinic I am building. The man who executed your brother." Judge Hartford's voice was careful. "Can you truly forgive that? I am learning to, just as you are learning to forgive yourself." Clara smiled sadly. "We are all just broken people trying to do better." "That is all anyone can do." Judge Hartford pulled her into an embrace, the first real embrace they had shared since she was a child. "You have grown into a remarkable woman, Clara. Your mother would be so proud." He left the next day, returning to Boston and his duties. But before he went, he gave Clara one final gift, a trust fund, set up in Thomas's name. Enough money to build the school they had planned, the Thomas Hartford Academy. "Use it well," he said as he boarded the coach. "Make your brother's name mean something good." Clara watched him go, then turned to find Nate waiting at the edge of town. "Your father seems like a good man," Nate said quietly. "He is trying to be." Clara took Nate's hand. "We all are." The next day Nate arrived at the church as the sun reached its peak. He found Clara and Pruitt waiting in the front pew. Pruitt stood when Nate entered. "I will leave you two alone, but first." He handed Nate an envelope, old yellowed, sealed with wax. "This arrived at the fort 2 days after Thomas's execution. It was addressed to you, but Shaw intercepted it. He kept it all these years. When I confronted him yesterday about his visit to Clara, he gave it to me, said it was time the past was buried properly." Nate took the envelope with unsteady hands, saw his name written in Thomas Hartford's precise script. Pruitt left. Clara and Nate sat together in the silent church. "Open it." Clara's voice was soft. "Whatever it says, I need to know." Nate broke the seal, pulled out a single sheet of paper, read words Thomas had written hours before his death. His grip on the letter faltered. Clara had to take it to read aloud. Her voice broke on the first line. "Nathaniel, if you are reading this, I am dead. I do not blame you for what you had to do. You followed orders. You did your duty. That is what good soldiers do. I only hope that someday you will understand I was innocent, that the charges against me were false, that I died for discovering something the Army wanted buried." She paused, wiping at her eyes. "I am writing to ask you for something. 2 things, actually. First, clear my name if you can. Find the truth. Let my sister Clara know I did not die a coward. She deserves that much." Clara's voice steadied. "Second, and more important, forgive yourself. I know you, Nate. I know you will carry this. I know it will eat at you. But I need you to understand something. You are not responsible for my death. Shaw is. The men who framed me are. The system that values obedience over justice is. But you were just a soldier caught in an impossible situation. Do not let my death destroy your life. Live, Nate. Live well. Live free. That is what I want. That is my final order to you." She paused again, her voice barely a whisper now. "And if you ever meet my sister Clara, tell her I loved her. Tell her I am proud of the woman she became. Tell her to find happiness, even if it seems impossible. Tell her the best way to honor me is to live a full life, not to mourn forever." The letter ended, "Your friend, Thomas Hartford." Silence filled the church. Nate sat with his head in his hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Clara folded the letter, carefully set it between them. "He forgave you." Her own voice was thick with tears. "Before he died, he forgave you. I do not deserve it. None of us deserve forgiveness. That is why it is called grace." Nate looked up. His face was wet, destroyed. "I loved him like a brother, and I killed him. How do I live with that? The same way I live with losing him." Clara took his hand. One day at a time, one choice at a time, choosing to honor his memory by becoming the person he believed we could be. They sat in the church as the sun moved across the sky. They talked, really talked, about Thomas, about the war, about guilt and grief and all the ways the past tried to destroy the future. And slowly, carefully, they began to build something new. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. A foundation they could build on if they were brave enough to try. That evening, Clara walked up to the mountain. She found Nate at Thomas's grave. Clara had not known it existed. A simple stone marker in a clearing behind the cabin, surrounded by wildflowers. The inscription was plain: Thomas Hartford, born 1848, died 1876. A good man. Nate knelt beside it, head bowed. He did not turn when Clara approached, but he spoke. "I buried him here. After they executed him, they were going to throw his body in an unmarked pit. I could not let that happen, so I took him, carried him up this mountain, gave him a proper burial." His voice broke. "It was the least I could do." Clara stood beside the grave, looked down at her brother's name carved in stone. "You have been taking care of him all this time. Every day for 7 years, I bring flowers. I talk to him. I ask for forgiveness I know I will never receive." Clara knelt beside Nate, placed her hand on the cold stone. "Thomas wrote you a letter, his last letter. Did you read it? 100 times. Then you know he forgave you, before he died. He forgave you, Nathaniel. It does not change what I did." "No." Clara's hand moved from the stone to Nate's shoulder. "But it changes what you can do now. Thomas did not want you to spend your life in penance. He wanted you to live, really live. Do you think you can do that?" Nate finally looked at her. His eyes were red, his face ravaged by grief. "I do not know how." "Neither do I." Clara's voice was soft. "But maybe we can figure it out together." She leaned forward, rested her forehead against his. "I cannot change what happened. You cannot undo what you did. But we can choose what comes next. We can choose to honor Thomas by living the way he wanted us to, with courage, with hope, with love." "You still love me." Nate's voice was barely a whisper. "Even knowing what I did, I am trying to." Honesty was all Clara had left to give. "Some days it is hard. Some days I look at you and all I see is the man who took my brother away. But other days, I see the man who has spent 7 years trying to make amends, the man who risked his life to save a stranger in a blizzard, the man who takes care of a little girl who is not his daughter, the man Thomas believed was good even at the end." She pulled back, met his eyes. "I think Thomas saw something in you that you have forgotten how to see in yourself, and I am choosing to believe him. I am choosing to see what he saw, if you will let me." Nate's hands came up, cradled her face. "I do not deserve you." "Probably not." Clara smiled through her tears. "But Thomas seemed to think we deserved each other, and I am tired of arguing with my brother." They kissed there beside Thomas's grave, with the sun warm on their backs and wildflowers blooming all around. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of promise, of possibility, of two broken people choosing to heal together. When they pulled apart, Nate spoke. "What happens now? Now we live." Clara stood, pulled him up with her. "We stop hiding. We stop punishing ourselves. We build a life that would make Thomas proud." 6 months passed. Clara opened a small clinic in Timber Falls. The town needed a doctor, and her nursing experience was close enough. She treated minors with broken bones, children with fevers, women in childbirth. She saved more lives than she could count. Nate came down from the mountain, not all the way, not entirely. He kept the cabin, spent his summers there, but winters he lived in town, in a small house next to Clara's clinic. He worked as a tracker for the territorial marshal, using his skills to find lost travelers and catch criminals. He was good at it, better than good. Lily thrived. With Clara as a mother figure and Nate as something like a father, she blossomed. She went to school, made friends, smiled more than she cried. On Sundays, the three of them would have dinner together at Mrs. Miller's boarding house, and it felt almost like a family. Almost, because Clara and Nate were not married. They lived separately. They courted properly with Mrs. Miller as chaperone with all the respectability the town demanded. But everyone knew. Everyone saw the way they looked at each other. The way Nate's face softened when Clara entered a room. The way Clara's hand would find his without thinking. On the first anniversary of the day Nate had found Clara in the snow, he asked her to marry him. They stood in the clearing where Thomas was buried. Spring had come again, turning the world green and gold. Nate knelt in the grass. "I have nothing to offer you but myself, and I know that is not much. I know I come with ghosts and guilt and a past that will never fully let me go, but I love you, Clara Hartford. I love you with everything I am and everything I will ever be. And if you will have me, I promise to spend every day of my life trying to be the man your brother believed I could be." Clara looked down at him, at this good man who had done a terrible thing, at this broken man who had spent 7 years trying to become whole, at this man she loved despite everything, because of everything. Yes, simple, sure. "Yes, I will marry you." The wedding was small. Reverend Pruitt officiated in the white church at the edge of town. Mrs. Miller cried. Lily served as flower girl, beaming with pride. A few townspeople attended, people who had come to know Nate and Clara over the past months, who saw beyond the tragedy to the love underneath. They spoke their vows simply. Nate promised to honor Clara, to cherish her, to build a life worthy of Thomas's memory. Clara promised to stand beside Nate to help him carry his burdens, to choose love over hate every day. When Pruitt pronounced them husband and wife, Nate kissed Clara with such tenderness that half the congregation wept. After the ceremony, they walked to Thomas's grave, together, husband and wife. Clara knelt, placed her bouquet on the stone. "I found him, Thomas, just like you told me to, and you were right. He is a good man, even when he does not believe it himself." She smiled through tears. "I hope wherever you are you can see this. I hope you know we are trying to live the way you wanted, trying to find joy in the wreckage, trying to be worthy of the second chance we have been given." Nate knelt beside her, placed his hand on the stone. "I will take care of her, I promise, the way you took care of her before, the way she deserves, and I will try every day to be the man you thought I could be." They stood together, arms around each other, looking at the grave of the man who had brought them together even in death. The sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. They walked back to the cabin, their cabin now. Nate had built on an addition, made space for Clara's things, for the life they were building together. That night, for the first time, Clara slept in Nate's arms as his wife. And for the first time in 7 years, Nate slept without nightmares. 3 years later. The cabin had grown again. 2 more rooms, a proper kitchen, a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Wildflowers grew in boxes beneath the windows. A garden flourished behind the house, vegetables and herbs that Clara used in her clinic. Clara stood in the kitchen, kneading bread, her hands white with flour. She was humming something she did without thinking now. Happiness had become so natural she barely noticed it anymore. Outside, she could hear Nate teaching their son to fish. Thomas Nathaniel Kane was 2 years old, dark-haired, and serious, with his mother's brown eyes and his father's quiet intensity. He studied the fishing rod in his small hands with the concentration of a scholar. Like this, Papa, just like that. Now wait. Fishing takes patience. Lots of patience. Another voice, older, amused. Lily had grown tall and graceful at 15, still living with Mrs. Miller in town during the school year, but spending every summer on the mountain with Nate and Clara. She sat beside young Thomas, helping him hold the rod. I have been fishing with your papa for 3 years, and I still have not caught anything. That is because you talk too much. Nate's voice was warm with affection. Fish do not like chatter. Clara watched them through the window. Her family. Imperfect, complicated, built from tragedy and forgiveness and the stubborn refusal to let the past define the future. She heard horses approaching, turned to see Reverend Pruitt riding up the trail with someone else. A younger man Clara did not recognize. She wiped her hands, went outside. "Reverend, what a nice surprise." Pruitt dismounted, smiling. "Clara, you look well. Marriage agrees with you." "It does." She smiled back. "Who is your friend?" "This is Daniel Shaw, Colonel Shaw's son." Clara went very still. The young man dismounted, removed his hat. He was perhaps 25, with kind eyes and his father's military bearing. "Mrs. Kane," his voice was respectful, "I apologize for arriving unannounced, but I wanted to meet you, and your husband." Nate had heard. He came up from the stream, Thomas in his arms, Lily close behind. "Shaw." His voice was neutral. "Mr. Kane?" Daniel Shaw stepped forward. "I came to deliver something, and to say something that is long overdue." He pulled a letter from his coat, held it out to Nate. "My father died 3 months ago, heart failure. Before he passed, he asked me to bring you this, and to tell you he was sorry. For everything." Nate took the letter with careful hands. "He also wanted me to tell you that he spent his last 3 years working with the War Department to reform the military justice system. He could not undo what he did to Thomas Hartford, but he tried to make sure it could not happen to anyone else." Daniel's voice was thick with emotion. "It does not make up for what he took from you, but it was his attempt at redemption." Clara moved to Nate's side, took his free hand. "Thank you for bringing this. There is one more thing." Daniel looked at them both. "My father left money in his will for a memorial. He wanted Thomas Hartford honored properly, a statue or a scholarship or whatever you think is appropriate. He left the decision to you." Clara and Nate exchanged a look. 7 years of communication in a single glance. "A school," Clara spoke firmly, "in Timber Falls, for children who cannot afford education otherwise. We will call it the Thomas Hartford Academy, so his name is remembered, not for how he died, but for what he believed in. Education, opportunity, second chances." Daniel smiled. "I think my father would have liked that. I will make the arrangements." He mounted his horse, tipped his hat. "Thank you for giving my father the chance to try to make things right, even at the end." He rode away. Clara and Nate stood together watching him go. Little Thomas squirmed in Nate's arms. "Down, Papa, want to fish more." Nate set him down, and the boy ran back to Lily at the stream. Clara opened the letter Daniel had brought, read Shaw's shaky handwriting. "He says he prays we found happiness, that he hopes we have built a life that honors Thomas, that he is sorry he cannot undo the past, but he is grateful we did not let it destroy our future." She folded the letter. "Do you think Thomas would approve of the school? I think he would love it." Nate pulled her close. "I think he would be proud of you, of us." They stood together on the porch looking out at the mountains, at Lily and Thomas by the stream, at the life they had built from ashes and grief, and the stubborn belief that love could heal even the deepest wounds. "We did it." Clara leaned into her husband. "We survived. We built something good." "We did." Nate kissed the top of her head. "Together." That evening the family gathered for dinner. Clara had made Thomas's favorite meal, the one her brother had requested every birthday, roast chicken and potatoes and fresh bread with honey. After dinner, Lily read stories to young Thomas while he fell asleep in her lap. Nate and Clara sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "Do you ever regret it?" Nate asked quietly. "Choosing this life, choosing me." Clara took his hand. "Every morning I wake up beside you is a choice. Every day I choose love over hate, forgiveness over revenge, future over past. And I have never regretted a single one of those choices." She looked at him. "Do you?" "I regret what I did. I will carry that forever. But I do not regret where it led me. Does that make me a terrible person? It makes you human." Clara squeezed his hand. "Thomas wanted us to live, Nathaniel. Really live, not just survive. I think we are finally doing that." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and stars appeared. Inside they could hear Lily singing softly to Thomas some lullaby she had learned as a child. "I got a letter from the War Department today," Nate spoke into the darkness. "They want me to testify about military justice reform, about what happened to Thomas. They think my perspective as the executioner could help change policy. Will you do it? I do not know. It means going back east, reliving everything." "I will go with you." Clara's voice was firm. "Whatever you decide, we do it together." "Together." Nate pulled her close. "I like the sound of that." They sat until the stars filled the sky, until the temperature dropped and drove them inside. They checked on Thomas sleeping peacefully in his small bed. Lily had already gone to her room exhausted from a day in the sun. In their own bedroom, Clara and Nate prepared for sleep. The routine was so familiar now, so normal. Clara brushing her hair while Nate read by lamplight. Small domestic moments that meant everything. As Clara climbed into bed, she saw Nate pull something from his nightstand. Thomas's letter, the last one. He read it every night before sleep. "You do not have to keep reading it." Clara moved close. "You have memorized every word." "I know." Nate folded it carefully. "But it reminds me of who I am trying to be, of what Thomas believed I could become. You have become that man." Clara took the letter, set it aside. "Thomas would be proud. I am proud." She kissed him. Soft and sweet and full of 7 years of learning how to love someone despite everything and because of everything. When they pulled apart, Nate smiled, a real smile, the kind he gave more often now, the kind that made him look young and almost carefree. "I love you, Clara Kane. I love you too." They lay in the darkness, tangled together, listening to the mountain wind and the soft breathing of their son in the next room. Clara thought about Thomas, about the brother she had lost and found again in the life she had built. She hoped wherever he was, he could see this, could see that his death had not been for nothing, that from tragedy had come love, from hate had come forgiveness, from ending had come beginning. "Thank you, Thomas," she whispered into the darkness, "for the letter, for sending me to Nate, for believing we could find our way through the pain. You were right. About everything. Rest now. We are okay. We are more than okay. We are happy." Beside her, Nate's breathing had deepened into sleep. For the first time in their marriage, Clara heard him dreaming. Not nightmares. Something peaceful. Something good. She closed her eyes. Outside, spring rain began to fall, gentle, cleansing, washing away the last traces of winter. Inside, a family slept, imperfect, complicated, built from impossible forgiveness and stubborn love. But together, always together, and that was enough. That was everything. The end.